Welcome to today's Explainer. We are connecting the dots on a rapidly changing world today. We're going to move all the way from macro global tensions right down to how the weather is actually going to impact your weekend plans. Let's get right into it.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap. We've got global tensions and conflicts, AI innovations and regulation, markets, trade, and science, and we'll wrap things up with sports, entertainment, and weather.
All right, starting right off with Section 1, Global Tensions and Conflicts. Our first major flashpoint today is the Strait of Hormuz. So, Iran's foreign minister has officially, and very plainly, dismissed former President Trump's recent claims that the U.S. is close to declaring this critical waterway American territory. They're basically saying no such negotiations are happening. But, making matters a whole lot more complex, a UAE-flagged vessel was just struck in this exact waterway. As you can imagine, this is putting immense pressure on Gulf Arab governments, forcing them to quietly question Washington's diplomatic grip on the region right now. And honestly, events in the broader Middle East are just moving at breakneck speed. Following tragic Israeli airstrikes in Deir al-Zohrani in southern Lebanon, strikes that left at least 11 dead and 19 wounded, making it the deadliest attack in that area since June, Hezbollah has immediately vowed retaliation. Now, amidst all this escalation, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is pushing for more ambitious U.S.-brokered negotiations, which leads us to the next critical step. U.S. envoy Jared Kushner is currently on his way to Cairo to kick off Phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire discussions. It is an incredibly fluid situation.
Zooming out, we are tracking several other global pressure points. U.S. lawmakers are now demanding investigations into mental health crises aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. Over in the West Bank, violence is notably intensifying. Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, the data shows that 5 years of Taliban rule has led to a really sharp decline in both boys' and girls' education. And finally, Myanmar has actually taken a crucial first step toward potentially repatriating over 300,000 Rohingya refugees currently living in camps over in Bangladesh.
Let's shift gears to Section 2, AI innovations and regulation.
Behind the scenes, the open-source AI arms race between Chinese and U.S. labs is absolutely wild right now. Alibaba just dropped their new Q1 model, and it boasts a massive 262,000 token context window. Basically, that means it can process an entire book's worth of text all at once. Analysts are already calling this a serious revenue threat to U.S. AI providers, but look, the U.S. is definitely not sitting still. Google just debuted HAIR. It's an open-source compiler that lets AI process data while keeping it completely encrypted and private. The AI literally never sees the raw user data. And then you have Meta introducing MuseGlimmer, which is a 30 billion parameter model designed to run locally right on your laptop for coding and tools. The sheer pace of this innovation is staggering.
But, with great power comes great regulation. The huge takeaway here is that non-compliance with the newly enforceable EU AI Act can now trigger massive penalties. We are talking up to 15 million euros, or 3% of a company's global revenue, whichever number happens to be higher. And these high-risk provisions officially went into full effect on August 2nd. So, how do companies avoid those massive fines? Well, here are the specific, mandatory steps they have to implement under these high-risk rules. Step 1, you have to heavily document your risk management processes. No cutting corners. Step 2, implement strict human override controls so the AI doesn't just run completely unchecked. And Step 3, mandatory AI self-identification. The system has to clearly and loudly announce that it is, in fact, an AI. If your company even touches the European market, these steps, they're no longer optional. Moving right along to Section 3, Markets, Trade, and Science. Remember those tensions in the Strait of Hormuz we just talked about? Well, here is where we see the real-world ripple effect on the global economy. Rising rhetoric and that recent vessel strike are directly pushing oil prices up, and it's hitting logistics hard. Shipping giant Maersk has actually had to increase its 2026 earnings outlook for the second time this year, and they explicitly cited higher freight rates caused by the blockade and the whole situation in Hormuz.
And speaking of ripple effects, those massive AI models we discussed earlier require an immense amount of computing power, and that is absolutely supercharging the hardware market. This skyrocketing demand for AI memory just caused South Korean semiconductor stocks to surge following a major upgraded outlook from Citi. LG Innotek led the pack, jumping a massive 10.9%. Samsung wasn't far behind at 7%, and SK Hynix gained 6.6%. The U.S. business rebound is directly fueling this sector's massive revenue growth.
Now, looking at the broader U.S. economy, we're seeing this really fascinating disconnect. On one hand, the S&P 500 has managed to post a third straight weekly gain, extending its rally despite a little bit of softness on Friday. But on the other hand, consumer sentiment has actually dropped 8%, landing at a score of just 51.0, mostly due to lingering inflation concerns. The stock market and the average consumer are basically living in two completely different economies right now. In other market news, Daiwa Capital notably cut SpaceX's price target from $175 down to $140, really highlighting just how capital-intensive their current massive expansion efforts are.
Let's pivot over to the science and health world for a second, because we've got some absolutely mind-bending discoveries today. First up, a 20-year analysis of U.S. health data found a crazy correlation. Rising atmospheric CO2 might be shifting human blood bicarbonate levels. That's a huge deal because that's what balances our body's acid levels. Researchers say we need more trials, but the idea that the atmosphere is literally altering our blood chemistry? Wild. Second, new data suggests adding more dietary potassium might actually be better for managing hypertension than just restricting your sodium. And lastly, a new study on mice has directly linked polyethylene microplastics to a higher risk of fatty liver disease.
Finally, bringing it all closer to home, here is Section 4, Sports, Entertainment, and Weather.
If you've been to the movies lately, you know Hollywood is officially roaring back to its 2019 pre-pandemic glory. Universal just became the first studio to cross the $4 billion mark globally this year, heavily driven by Christopher Nolan's newest film, The Odyssey, which is honestly already nearing $1 billion worldwide all on its own. Actually, 4 films have crossed that $1 billion mark this year. We're expecting between 115 and 120 wide releases, marking a full return to pre-pandemic volume, with Amazon MGM stepping up huge to release 13 films. But I will say, theater exhibitors are still a bit anxious. They are closely watching the Paramount-Warner Bros. Discovery merger trial because they're terrified a combined studio might slash future theatrical output.
If you're planning on hanging out on the couch this weekend, well, you're in luck because the sports slate is absolutely stacked. The NFL preseason is in full swing with a 9-game Saturday schedule. The highlights there are definitely the Rams at the Chiefs and the Cowboys visiting the Seahawks. But the biggest event of the weekend might be tonight in Philadelphia at UFC 330. Islam Makhachev is attempting to make history by securing a record 17th straight win against Ian Machado Gary. If he wins, he finally surpasses Anderson Silva's legendary win streak. We've also got Mackenzie Dern defending her strawweight title in the co-main. Plus, in baseball, a huge clash of top National League records as Brewers ace Jacob Misiorowski faces the Dodgers. And for you golf fans, the PGA Tour is serving up an incredibly tight battle between Hovland and Scheffler.
And you know what? You might actually want to stay indoors for those games anyway. Why? Because a staggering 97 million Americans are currently under weather advisories as a massive heat dome intensifies across the south and central U.S.
This weekend is basically the peak of this really intense heat event. Let's look at the regional threats. The Dallas-Fort Worth area is seeing highs near 102 degrees with a heat index pushing 107. Middle Tennessee is literally trapped under extreme heat warnings right now. In fact, heat index values are stretching from 105 to 115 degrees all the way from Texas straight through the southeast. Meanwhile, up in the northeast, residents are facing an isolated afternoon storm threat before they hopefully get a little bit of midweek relief. Look, if you are in any of these impacted zones, please make sure you take precautions this Sunday.
And that brings our explainer to a close for today. We have covered a vast, deeply interconnected web of news today, from escalating tensions in the Strait of Hormuz to EU AI fines, all the way to box office dominance and a massive heat dome. So my question to you is, out of everything we discussed, which of these global shifts is actually going to impact your daily life the most this weekend? Thanks so much for learning with me today. I'll see you in the next one.